Hello, this is Jamie from Epoch Builds, and in today's video, Dread has a poor sore throat, so I will be doing the intro this time around. We will be talking about Retaliation Golem 3.0. Before we get into the video, if you've been enjoying the constant flow of Last Epoch content, I'd suggest leaving a like and subscribing to the channel, as that's the best way to support him. So Bone Golem Retaliate is one of his favorite archetypes from the past, as being able to hit your own minions and create a big AoE bone nova that pierces all enemies, an oddity among minion builds, as EHG has a hard-on to keep AoE small and hard to come by for minion builds, which means that this is currently one of the best monolith farmers for minions in general. One thing to note, he did try Jurla, and sadly, due to how little HP Bone Golem has, at least in comparison to A-Bomb, and not being able to make sure he doesn't get hit by the void beams, like the Wraith Necro, it means that this is not a viable T4 dungeon farmer. So if you want one, he suggests one of the others I just mentioned. So if you are new to the game and don't understand how the combo works, Bone Golem has a base chance to create a bone nova at 15%. Then you can add a little bit more to this and then eventually triple it for friendly hits. Whenever we hit our minion through Rip Blood, it means it procs a bone nova every time. We then utilize Bone Curse. Bone Curse, first off, gives Bone Golem 150% more physical damage, which the base damage of Bone Nova is physical, which is very good. And it also curses our enemy, so whenever anything hits him, it procs a Bone Curse hit, which can apply ailments. But it does count as a hit for Bone Nova, and since it's our hit, it gets the triple retaliation chance, which means whenever an enemy hits our Bone Golem, we have a 125% chance to proc a Bone Nova at least, and when we hit it with our own Rip Blood, it means we proc Bone Nova twice per hit, so we can deal single target while also letting the Bone Golem help clear off enemies quickly, leading to very satisfying gameplay. Before, the build had one main problem. Dreadshade would always inevitably kill your Bone Golem. This meant that originally, the nerf to the auto crit node from a 6-second cooldown to an 18-second cooldown. It means that if our Bone Golem is too squishy, we have to wait to get him set up again. But with the nerf, they actually buffed the build entirely, as with the node that disables the Dreadshade degen, and just increases the damage taken by our Bone Golem. It means as long as we make our Bone Golem tanky enough, we never have to worry about Dreadshade killing our Bone Golem anymore. But we do need to worry about Infernal Shade. Infernal Shade gives our Bone Golem a large amount of movement speed, allowing him to move from pack to pack quickly, increasing quality of life. You do need to remember to recast Infernal Shade much more frequently than normal, due to the fact that Bone Golem is much squishier than Summon Abomination is. With all that being said, let's get into the video, shall we?
Alright, here we are in game with the build. Thanks for the girlfriend for doing the intro this time around, because my throat is absolutely destroyed today, so I'll try to keep it short. So Bone Golem, summon Bone Golem for monolith grinding. You put the Dreadshade, the Infernal Shade, and the Bone Curse on him, and he does a bunch of damage. Make sure to weave in a Bone Curse every 4 seconds, because Bone Curse almost triples his damage. Very strong. So yeah, so that's pretty much it for like everything. That's the whole rotation. Just make sure your Infernal Shade is being reapplied. As you can tell, Infernal Shade is much more dangerous on Bone Golem than it is Abomination, so you will have to constantly reset it. But as you can tell with the damage leech, it has plenty of leech to keep up, so as long as your Bone Golem is actually doing things in the mono, it's completely fine, especially on bosses when they have plenty of HP to leech. So yeah, and of course, if all else fails, you can always just do this and just summon a new one. You must be wondering, Dread, why don't we play without Infernal Shade? Well, I can show you the difference here. So this is Bone Golem without Infernal Shade. Go attack. Right? This is Bone Golem with Infernal Shade. Wait, I gotta wait a few seconds. I gotta wait a few seconds because Infernal Shade takes a few seconds to take into effect. Now I'll show you. Big difference, right? That's why we run with Infernal Shade, is for the actual movement speed. Now, As you can tell there, he's attacking really fast. Why is that important? Well, if you don't know, Bone Golem has this animation where he attacks with a melee attack, right? Now, what we want him to do is to spend as little time as possible in that melee attack animation, if that makes sense. We don't want him to spend forever. You see that? That will make it so your clear speed is worse because he will take longer to move between pack and pack. That's why we buff up his cast speed and attack speed ridiculously so that he is like quick to go. Like he just zooms through monoliths, and that's exactly what we want for this build. So let's talk about the skills, so shall we? So for Bone Golem here, we take 5 points out of Amalgam of Mages. I made a mistake. Take out 1 point out of there. I've been, juggling around points. 5 out of 5 points in Amalgam of Mages. 5 points in Bone Hail for the Bone Nova chances. 25% chance on top of the 15% chance at base. So this brings you up to 40%. Then we triple it for ally hits. So it gets to 120 for ally hits and then 40 for enemy hits. So whenever we have a Bone Curse, if an enemy hits him, it's a 120 chance to proc it, and then it's another 40% chance because the enemy hits the Bone Golem. While for us, if we hit him twice, it's like 250. So we have a chance of getting 3 Bone Novas, which is absolutely nuts. Then 1 point into Flight of the Femurs here for the Bone Nova Pierce. We want the Pierce because you want them to hit the entire screen. You also want the Bone Nova speed and range so that it spams in a bigger area, and that's why this is so good for monolith grinding because the AoE is so big. Then for Bone Curse here, Bone Curse, like I said, we're applying it. As you can tell, he's being applied, and if we hit him, you'll actually get 2 Bone Novas instead of just 1. I know it looks weird, but we actually get 2 Bone Novas instead of 1. I can actually prove it here. So if we set it up here, you see how I hit once, and there's 2 Bone Nova procs instead of just 1. It's very strong. 1 point travel into Crippling Anguish, 4 points into Cultist Fever. The cast speed really helps because the less animation time, the better. Then 5 points of Merciless. This gives you 50% more physical damage with a minion. But then, of course, we go to Barbed Construct to make a 200% increased effect. So this goes up to 150% increase more damage. And since Bone Nova, if you don't know, is actually a physical skill, it doesn't tell you, but it's a physical skill. And all of its adaptive damage is being given as physical, which makes this node combination really strong. And of course, we just grab the area and some armor shred chance. It doesn't really matter what you technically run for the rest of it, as long as you're not grabbing something like Signet of Agony or like Bone Prison. Mainly the area, like whatever you feel like, you could like kind of like mess around with this and figure out what you prefer. But I found I like the extra armor shred on bosses because if you don't know, Bone Golem and the target will get Bone Curse, as you can tell there. You see that? How they both get Bone Curse? So anything that you apply here will apply to your Golem, and it will also apply to the enemy if you're like catching them in the AoE, which on bosses, that's normally what you're doing. Rip Blood here, it's just your stereotypical hit my minion Rip Blood setup, just the -3 so that it's a 0 mana cost to get as much cast speed as possible because the faster cast speed, the more damage we do with our Bone Golem. 5 points into Quenching for the health globe orbs. We're very tanky because of that. We just literally leech all of our life back very quickly. 3 points into Mana Feast. This helps it so whenever we're just spamming our blood here, we get our mana back. Not really important, but the problem is like where else are we going to put the points? Then 1 point into Hematology. This is why we're intelligent stacking here. We're intelligence stacking to give our Bone Golem HP as well as damage and stuff. And it also double dips and gives us health as well from our Bone Golem globes. Our Rip Blood globes. Then 1 point into Marrow Drinker, so we get double the amount of health, but it only targets minions. This is important because you only want to be hitting your minion instead of like enemies, which is obviously important for the build. Then Dreadshade here, it's your stereotypical solo mini Dreadshade setup, but we'll talk over it real quick. Lone Watcher, this makes it so that when we apply Dreadshade, he never dies, and it lasts for like 40 seconds, which is really good considering the cooldown is 18 seconds. Obviously, we want Egoism because the minion always crits. Otherwise, this build would not function because we need the crit because Bone Golem has no innate base crit, so this is very mandatory. This going from 6 seconds to 8 seconds kind of sucks because before, when it was a 6-second cooldown, we were able to just resummon Bone Golem every 10 seconds and like improve our monolith clear with that with some extra button presses, but it's like whatever. doesn't matter now. Then 1 point to all for one, of course, 60% more damage, really strong. We go for the blind fury. So the blind doesn't matter at all. And the increased attack speed's nice because it makes those animation times shorter. Of course, same thing with Dying Coven here. 4 points in a Grim Fate. This makes it so our Bone Golem takes 100% increased damage because of this node, but we also deal 60% more damage, so it's very worth it. And then, of course, 3 points to Flesh Harvest. This makes it so whenever our Bone Golem actually starts taking damage from something like Infernal Shade, so what happens is our Infernal Shade will start ticking down our Bone Golem, and he will start doing more damage as a consequence here, which I'll show you here. We're going to wait a second. So normally, he's doing like 100k ticks, 100k hits, and we're going to let him take some damage here, as you see. Let him take some damage. So this is going to give you increased buff effect per missing HP. So if he's missing 66% HP, he's going to get 66% of the buff extra on top of it. So as you can tell here, we're going to have him do this. As until there, he was doing like 180k crits instead of 120k crits. So yeah, so having that node is really strong for when like Orbis slaps him really hard or whatever, because he'll just do a bunch of damage and it'll go right back up. And that's why we don't feel that much. We don't feel that bad with Infernal Shade and Monoliths. Then for Infernal Shade, your stereotypical Soul Minion Infernal Shade, the only points that matter are these points here. That's all that matters. We don't care about these points. These are just dump points, so the game stops yelling at me to put points into the skill. But yeah, like these are the most important things because we want it to be minion targetable. We want it to give haste because as much movement speed as possible we want so that our Bone Golem zips around and stuff. 1 point into subjugation. This is the thing that will eventually kill your Bone Golem. This is why you have to reset it every so often to combat the degen, as you can tell there, because it increases over time. Like I said, the leech helps a lot too with that. Then unlimited duration on minions so that we don't have to cast it that often. If we only if we didn't run this node, we would never get the benefit of the 72% increased cast, attack, and movement speed because the base duration gets up to like 8 seconds. So you need the unlimited duration. Otherwise, he's going to stop. Like he's going to stop pretty much. He's going to stop gaining the attack speed and the movement speed because it resets that buff to this thing. So like obviously you want to have it on for as long as possible before you have to like recast it. And that's pretty much it for the skills. For the passives here, we take 8 points to Forbidden Knowledge. Intelligence is very strong for us. 4 out of 5 points for Dark Rituals. We do like the attack speed for our Golem, but since we're not constantly spamming our Golem like we used to because of Dreadshade, this node isn't as strong because it doesn't really matter for us because we don't get the... Because it's like a 10-second duration for this a cast speed, but it's not very good because we're not constantly spamming our Bone Golem anymore. 8 points in Stolen Vitality for Vitality and Minion Health because we want as much minion health as possible to make our Bone Golem as tanky as possible. And of course, Vitality is really strong for us because we're building as much HP as possible because Rip Blood can sustain that much HP, right? 8 points into Survival of the Cruel. Like I said, we want as much HP as humanly possible to be tanky. 8 points in Elixir of Hunger, of course, for more HP, and of course the attacks, the cast speed is really strong. 4 out of 5 points Travel for Risen Army. The attack speed for a Golem is really good because, like I said, less time he spends in animations, more times he spends killing stuff. 3 points Travel into Cursed Blood, 4 points into Aegis Fall for the Minion Armor Shred chance. This is really strong because, as you can tell, we can hit him a lot. This on top of the Armor Shred from Bone Curse is enough to reach Armor Shred cap, probably, I believe, with Aegis Fall on our Minion. 1 point Travel to Blood Armor. 9 points out of Mortal Tether, could be 10 points depending on if you mess around with points and want as much minion health as possible. I found 861% with 40 intelligence is fine, but your results may vary because of that. You might have to like mess around with that and maybe build more HP sometimes. 8 points into Tyrant. We want as much HP as possible. This is why we're going so overkill on minion HP, is so that we can run Tyrant because it reduces our minion health, right? And of course, our Bone Golem is reducing minion health, but we want the HP. So it's kind of a toss up there. 5 points to Frantic Summons, like I said, improves animation times, and of course gives us cast speed, which gives us damage because our single target is spamming Rip Blood on our Abomination. I mean, on our Bone Golem. 5 points into River of Blood for the minion crit damage leech his life. This is how he's leeching all his life back instantly, is because of this node. Very strong. 10 points to Moonlight Pyre. You want as much flat as humanly possible for the Bone Nova because that's one of the biggest ways of scaling our damage. So flat is OP. 8 points into Cling to Life for the Vitality and all res. This is really good for us. 1 second here. Yeah, the minion all res is good because it just says 16% less damage taken for our minions because they don't have that much resistance to start out with. 10 points into Rite of Undeath for the resistances, and of course the increased damage works with this. And some of the damage, the flat damage from Dreadshade is necrotic, as you can tell, so this increased necrotic is very good as well. Then 10 points to Blade of Forlorn. We have to run this node now because they nerfed death rattles. They no longer give you 200% crit multi, they only give you 100% crit multi. So you don't technically need to run a death rattle. You could run something else, but I feel like a death rattle would be very strong. And of course, especially with the death rattle with like minion health on it, would be insanely strong. I haven't gotten the time to throw a thing on this yet though. And that's pretty much it for the passives, I think, for the gearing. No uniques required. You technically don't need Death Rattle at all. You technically don't need Bastion, but obviously it's a good quality of life. You could use Usurper's Mandate. So Usurper's Mandate would be really strong if it rolled well and it had minion physical, or I think minion spell damage on it. If you roll an Usurper's Mandate with minion spell, it might be better than this setup because not only do you get the 50 health on minion hit, which is like all the fucking time with Bone Nova, right? You also get the minion spell damage and the plus to skills. So this could be better than Bastion. I just don't have the luxury of having a spell damage Usurper's Mandate. So if you have one, I would suggest trying it out. Although you do lose cast speed, which is the main problem. For idols, just as much HP as humanly possible. You just want to be as chunky as possible. And of course, one idol with chance for Mark for Death on hit so that we can apply Mark for Death. It's just 25% pen. Just read this as 25% pen and you're good to go. And just like I said, as much HP and resistances. That's why this build is so cheap, is because we don't really care about our idols, which means we can run whatever we want. Then for the helmet, level to Bone Golem for more HP and stuff on the Bone Golem. Intelligence, because we want intelligence for the Rip Blood and for his HP and damage. Health, Crit Avoid, Endurance. This would have been really good if it like sealed off that Crit Avoid and then went into Endurance instead. That would have been really strong. And of course, you want it on a Burial Mask. This is the most important part. Burial Mask, because the adaptive spell damage here is insane because it starts off with like 20, I think. This literally doubles your adaptive spell damage off the bat. So Burial Masks are insane for this build. I said Death Rattle is very suggested, like heavily suggested, but you don't need it to start the build. It's just you want something for that later to push the envelope with the build. Then you want a Skeletal Scepter with minion spell, minion physical, cast speed. This is all that matters. Obviously, if you have an Usurper's Mandate, give it a try. The chest, intelligence, you want vitality or minion health instead, and then HP is pretty good. Bastion of Honor, like I said, you could use a rare shield with like minion health. If you have an LP Bastion of Honor, you could go with minion health, because a lot of minion builds use Bastion of Honor. I probably think that Bastion's going to get a nerf soon, so have fun with it while you can. Obviously, you could just run like any old shield, like it would just work just fine, like I said, or Usurper's Mandate. Rings here, minion health, intelligence, resistance. You want minion health and intelligence because that will be multiplicative with each other to make our Bone Golem as tanky as possible. And of course, resistance, Crit Avoid, endurance, HP, the usual fanfare. Same thing on the other side. You can use mini damage, intelligence, cold res. Like this is a really good ring. And you want the turquoise rings because you want as much minion crit multi as possible for the damage. Of course, I got a really good ring here. This is like one of the best rings I've ever fucking crafted, by the way. I'm sad that didn't roll intelligence, though. I would rather have that rolled intelligence, but it's like, whatever. I can use this on other mini builds. The belt, HP, minion HP. You could seal this off and get minion damage, minion health, and then like some like endurance or extra HP on the belt. Yeah, I think that would be it. Yeah, there's not really much else you'd want to do with that. gloves. You want noble gloves because you want as much cast speed as possible, and you can make up the resistances elsewhere. HP, crit avoid, intelligence, minion health, cast speed, as much cast speed as you can get. Boots, these boots are pretty trash. Vitality, movement speed, HP. Of course, heal burning boots for the resistances. Obviously, you want the crit avoid rolled better, or you could just run HP as well. And the relic here, I like this relic. This relic's really good. Having cast speed, intelligence, resistances on it like that, it's really strong. This is on the wrong base. You want it on a runed bone base, which is, obviously, one of Acolyte's best bases for their relics. I just got this on a cage soul instead, but obviously you want it on a runed bones. But it's not that important for Bone Golem as it is on other mini builds, because as you can tell, he gets plenty of movement speed through all the other sources, so like he doesn't technically need the movement speed from runed bones to feel good. But yeah, that's pretty much it for the build. That's pretty much it for the build. With all that being said, thank you all for watching. Have a wonderful rest of the day wherever you're at, and bye.